Today I will be talking about the case of Plessy V. Ferguson, argued April 18th of 1896 and decided May 18th of 1896. The case surrounds a man from Louisiana named Homer Plessy, who was described as 7/8 Caucasian. At the time, it was believed that you could determine the exact amount of quote-unquote black blood within oneself. He was solicited by the Committee of Citizens, a group of New Orleans residents who sought to repeal the Separate Car Act of 1890. The Louisiana statute reads that all railway companies carrying passengers in their coaches in the state shall provide separate but equal accommodations for white and colored races, providing 2 or more passenger coaches for each passenger train, or by dividing the passenger coaches by a partition, so to secure the equal accommodations, provided that the section shall not be construed to apply to street railroads. No persons shall be admitted to occupy the seats in the coaches other than the ones assigned to them on account of the race they belong to. All that long-winded legal jargon, in simpler terms, is just saying that railroad companies in Louisiana must provide 2 or more train cars for each race, and that train cars are only allowed to be occupied by those of the race assigned to it. So anyways, the Committee of Citizens asked Plessy, who was technically black under Louisiana law, to sit in the white-only car of a Louisiana train. Plessy agreed to participate in a test to challenge the act. He paid for a first-class passage on the East of Louisiana Railroad from New Orleans to Covington, a passage that was within the same state. It was also interesting to note that the railroad company knew and cooperated with this movement because it required the purchase of additional cars. For the day that he had purchased the ticket, Plessy took his seat, and after a few minutes, Plessy was told to vacate the white-only car. He refused and was forcibly removed by a police officer and arrested. It was argued that the mixture of colored blood was not discernible within him, so that brought forth the question of what qualifies someone as a black person or a white person, and also argued that he was entitled to every recognition, right, privilege, and immunity secured by the citizens of the United States of the white race by the Constitution. At trial, Plessy's lawyers argued that the Separate Car Act violated the 13th and 14th Amendment. The judge found that Louisiana could enforce this law insofar as it affected railroads within its boundaries, and Plessy was convicted. Then, Plessy filed for a writ of error from the court. The legal issue at hand is, does the Separate Car Act violate the 14th Amendment? The Supreme Court disregarded the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and involuntary servitude. They did not believe that it applied to the case. And the 13th Amendment first was said by the Supreme Court to be heavily relied upon by the plaintiff and was torn down, saying that the act merely implies distinction between white and colored races and does not destroy the legal equity of the 2 races or reestablish involuntary servitude. So the main amendment at hand here was the 14th Amendment, saying that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to jurisdiction thereof are made citizens of the U.S. and the state they reside in, and also are entitled to due process in thereof. The original purpose was to naturalize the citizenship of the formerly enslaved. The questioning of the 14th Amendment brings up the question of whether or not it actually covers equality of the 2 races. An example of case law that was applied was the Civil Rights Case 109 U.S. 3. In that case, it was held in Congress that all persons in the U.S. are entitled to full and equal enjoyment of the accommodations, advantages, facilities, land or water, theaters as public areas, applicable to every race, color. However, ironically enough, this excludes state legislation, and Congress is not allowed to make a municipal law for regulating private rights, saying that the 14th Amendment did not permit the federal government to prohibit discriminatory behavior by private parties. The decision was based on a strict textual reading of the documents, and this decision was used to make a decision for Plessy as well. The court's final decision, in short, was that segregation in itself did not constitute unlawful discrimination. The object of the amendment is to enforce equality of the 2 races before the law and had no intent to abolish distinction based on color or to enforce social commingling. The court decided with Ferguson for the state of Louisiana, finding nothing discriminatory about Louisiana law. Justice Brown stated that separate treatment did not imply inferiority of African Americans, but merely was a matter of state policy. He suggested that African Americans were responsible for interpreting the law as inferiority. He had pointed out that there was not a meaningful difference in equality between the white-only and African American railway cars, which was somewhat true in the railway cars, but was much less true in other types of segregated facilities. But it did set the precedent for all future cases of segregation, and all but one of the judges were in agreement with this ruling. The one judge that dissented was Justice John Harlan, who argued that the Constitution should be colorblind in the case of race, and that the 14th Amendment did imply equality. Implications of this decision allowed for legalized segregation and separate but equal treatment for many years to come, and was allowed up until a new precedent was set by Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, which stopped segregation in schools. Many southern states took advantage of Plessy v. Ferguson's decision, legalizing segregation, and began to pass laws like those in Mississippi requiring segregation and stating that anyone not following the law could be jailed. Though the Supreme Court accepted the proposition that these people could maintain their full equality even while being racially separated, this was strongly abused by southern states who continued to push this ruling further and further. Peaceful acts by people trying to retain justice often sparked violent responses. For over half a century, these rulings continued to tear apart black and white communities within the South, eating away at any hopes of equality between them, until Brown versus Board of Education was passed, and thankfully today segregation is illegal, but we still have many other fights for equality that we continue to battle.